Welcome to So Money 2000. That's right, a new era. We have reached a milestone, everybody. It feels impossible to say, but we have surpassed 2,000 episodes. When I launched the show more than 12 years ago, I had a pretty straightforward goal. I just wanted to help people feel less intimidated by money. I wanted to demystify investing, explain taxes without putting people to sleep, make negotiating less scary. And this was important to help more women feel confident asking for what they deserved. I thought if I could make money feel a little less overwhelming, maybe it could become a source of empowerment instead of stress. And I still believe that. But somewhere between the first episode and last week, episode 2000, something unexpected happened. The show changed me. After thousands of conversations with entrepreneurs, psychologists, economists, best-selling authors, CEOs, artists, policymakers, so many listeners who trusted me with their own stories, I realized that while every conversation began with money, very few ended there. Money was usually just the entry point. Before long, we were talking about identity, family, fear, purpose, ambition, regret, resilience, love, and the messy, beautiful work of figuring out what kind of life we actually want to build. One of the biggest surprises has been discovering how universal our fears really are. I've interviewed people whose net worths would make headlines and people who were rebuilding after bankruptcy. From the outside, their lives looked nothing alike. But underneath it all, the questions were often remarkably similar. They would ask, am I doing enough? Am I making the right decisions? What if I lose everything I've worked for? What if I'm already behind? Billionaires actually think that sometimes. Money changes the circumstances of our lives, but it doesn't magically erase our uncertainty. And that's been one of the most humbling lessons of this journey. Another realization that's stayed with me is that money solves money problems. And that's no small thing. Financial security matters. Being able to pay your bills, weather an emergency, retire with dignity, help your kids, or care for aging parents, all very important. But I've also come to appreciate that the greatest gift money offers is not luxury, it's choice. Choice over how you spend your time, who gets your energy, whether you stay in a job that no longer serves you or take a chance on something new. The people I've admired most of these 2,000 episodes are not necessarily the wealthiest. They're the ones who have intentionally used money to create lives that feel aligned with their values. And then there's fear. If you've been with me for a while, you know I've become a little obsessed with this topic. Long before I wrote A Healthy State of Panic, I started noticing a pattern in my interviews. The people I admired most weren't fearless. They were simply willing to act before certainty arrived. They started businesses without guarantees. They changed careers without knowing exactly what was next. They invested when it felt uncomfortable. They had difficult conversations. They admitted that they didn't have all the answers. And it turns out courage rarely looks like confidence. More often, it looks like taking the next step while your knees are still shaking. And perhaps the lesson that's changed me the most is how I define wealth. Earlier in my career, I probably measured success the way many of us do. Bigger numbers, bigger opportunities, bigger milestones. And those things still matter, and I won't pretend that they don't. I love building things. I love building businesses. I love to set ambitious goals, and I still get excited about growth. But today, when I think about what it means to be wealthy, I think first about freedom. I think about waking up and being able to spend my day in ways that reflect my priorities. I think about having dinner with my family, saying no to work that doesn't align with my values, creating projects that genuinely excite me, and having enough financial security that decisions can be driven by purpose, not panic. And that's a very different definition of success than the one I carry with me 12 years ago, just when I got married, before I became a mom, and before we got to 2,000 episodes. If you've listened to even just one So Money episode, if you've sent me a question, if you've challenged my thinking, if you've shared the show with a friend, if you've simply invited me into your commute or your workout or your morning walk, you've been part of this evolution too. You've trusted me with your questions about money, but even more than that, you've trusted me with your hopes and your worries, your dreams, sometimes your biggest crossroads. And that has always felt like an incredible privilege, and it's one that I will never take for granted. People have asked me for years what So Money actually means. It's not just a tagline from a movie. After 2,000 episodes, I think I finally have an answer. Being So Money isn't about having the biggest paycheck or the perfect investment portfolio. It's about building a life where money becomes a tool instead of the goal. It's about creating enough freedom to live according to your values, enough resilience to weather life's inevitable surprises, and enough confidence to remember that your worth has never been defined by your net worth. Because if these last 2,000 conversations have taught me anything, it's this: money's powerful, and so are you. Thanks for being here, everybody. I can't wait to see where the next chapter takes us.